welcome to Top Shot, the another edition in which we are bringing the top people from different walks of life to talk to you on many issues. I am Suresh Prabhu, welcoming General Mehta, Secretary General of Confederation of Indian Industry, the CII, on the studio to talk to you about various issues which concern you and me. General Mehta, welcome to our studios and thank you very much for joining us here. General Mehta, I am sometimes wonder what's the role for a general who actually has commanded large number of armed forces into industry?
Well, I personally think there is really in one sense very little change, because an association like the Confederation of Indian Industry, working in it is more like a calling than as a profession, which comes out of passion, out of understanding what are the national interests, how can they be best served. So I see my staff and myself actually really furthering a national effort, and therefore in that sense, since both serving in the army as well as serving in CII are both callings, I really don't see any major difference.
In fact, there you are wearing uniform to serve the country, here you are wearing a jacket to serve the country. So that's
I would say that.
Yeah. General, actually, CII represents the manufacturing and service sector of the country, and today we are seeing that Indian economy is registering a growth rate of 9% plus for some time now and likely to sustain it. What do you think this particular growth rate is something sustainable, or is it something there is challenges for this growth that we are witnessing today?
Before I answer that, responding to the first remark about manufacturing and something, actually CII as a chamber has a much wider canvas. Okay. We are looking at manufacturing, we are looking at agriculture, we are looking at industry, we are looking at services, we are looking at infrastructure, we are looking at the social sector, we have an international division. So really it covers a very large gambit of what is required to be done. But specific to your question about 9.4%, clearly we have to look at it becoming both not only competitive but also sustainable. In the last 40 quarters or so, the industry has shown remarkable progress and actually caught the global eye on our abilities, capabilities, technological and otherwise. And I think for it to remain sustainable, there are many more things that need to be done, both in terms of policy and the way manufacturing or industry looks at the way it operates.
Of course, General, you represent, as you said, all the three segments of Indian economy: agriculture, services and manufacturing. But in India we are seeing that services dominate the economy more than 50%, and manufacturing close to 25%, and agriculture less than 20%. Now China has more than 50% of its GDP coming from manufacturing. You think this lopsided thrust on services is in the long-term interest of the country?
No, I mean I won't use the word lopsided, nor would I say that this is the ideal model. But clearly, if India has to continue to retain its position in the global economic order, manufacturing must be one of our key strengths, as indeed must be agriculture. But our economy and our strength in our people and our human capital has demanded of us, and we have delivered to the world very good services. So it should be a healthy mix, but neither agriculture nor manufacturing can be downgraded.
Yeah. Because not putting enough thrust into manufacturing means that we are not creating enough blue collar jobs, and just the white collar jobs, the type of jobs that are getting probably one section of society is benefiting. So if you want really a diversified portfolio of our GDP, then probably more thrust on manufacturing, will it be called for? Or?
It can be called for, it must be called for. However, there is a linkage between infrastructure and manufacturing, because costs in relation to how do you move in the raw materials, how do you take them out, how you deliver them, how you put them to the ports, how you export them, that is a function of infrastructure. When you talked about China and manufacturing, I think you also implied perhaps the type of infrastructure that they have developed. And I think when our infrastructure begins to improve, you will see a good balance and more jobs coming up.
And this is something which since 1991, when we started economic reforms for the first time, we are talking about infrastructure as one of the bottlenecks for development of industry. But very little has been done on development infrastructure. In fact, in the last 16 years, I would say the infrastructure bottleneck has increased because infrastructure remained the same and the activities have increased. So what in your opinion is really how to address this infrastructure problem?
See, we'll have to address it at many levels. It is actually ought to be addressed both by the center in terms of policy, which they are doing, and at the states in identifying what are those major areas in which if they put it down, the economic growth of that state is going to be much faster, much greater. And therefore, there has to be at the center, at the state, for financial institutions, some sort of a blueprint on which we need to move. The idea of a corridor now between Bombay and Delhi, that I think is a great idea. Similarly, ports, airports, you see now the beginning of the end of the tunnel in relation to what that's going to happen, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, and in that, we normally talk about infrastructure. China developed it, most of it from their public investment. In India, we are talking about private-public partnership, the PPP. We have used that term so many times, so often that probably people have lost relevance into that idea. What do you think, PPP in India, is it really doable? And if it is doable, how to go
No, I think
forward?
PPP is doable, but the percentage of private money that will go into infrastructure will have to be not more than 20% of what is anticipated. We are looking at about $350 billion now for the infrastructure requirement, and I don't think more than 60 or 70 will have to come from the private industry, because this is something that the government needs to put down for everybody else to thrive. However, PPP is definitely a workable model.
And when we talk about 350 or 400 billion, that is what is the estimate for the next 5 years. But normally we have been saying that India needs 8% of the GDP going into infrastructure, and we are not even putting half of that figure. So first of all, we are targeting even 350 billion, which is less than half of what is really required. And then of course we don't attain that much also. So you think how to actually put this huge investment into infrastructure on a fast track? Because if the backlog continues like this, we are going to have a problem.
So we have to attract capital. We have to attract capital. We have to attract capital both from outside and from inside, and make a playing field where there are many players willing to come in, both and invest, and then be able to deliver. I think in this, there is some movement that's taking place, and I'm hopeful that with what the finance minister and the government has put into place, some things will happen.
Now you also said that you represent agriculture, and while manufacturing is growing, of course the recent figures show that manufacturing growth has been slowing down a little bit in the recent weeks. But more importantly, agriculture is not showing any growth at all. In fact, it has just shown some growth this time because of good monsoon, after a very big decline in the previous year. So it's not really the growth, if you can say. And farmers are committing suicide at a time when India is growing at 9%. So how do you actually address this paradox? On one hand, we are growing, and on the other hand, people are just cannot even live their lives.
Clearly, this is a matter of concern. It's a matter of concern to everybody in the industry that agriculture has to grow, and has to grow faster. But for it to go faster, markets have to be linked. Value addition has to take place. The food processing industry has to benefit. Retail has to come in a big way. Investment has to come in a big way. There's a cold chain requirement, because the amount of wastage that we do in relation to the one that we produce is probably out of proportion to whatever anybody else done anywhere in the world. Clearly, these things are facilitated. More investment will come, and I think we are here again, once again, we are seeing things happening. However, there must be stability in the policies that come with regards to this. If that doesn't take place, the investor will shy away, and it's not good for agriculture.
Do you think there is a role for private sector in agriculture?
Definitely. Once the farmer does the produce, how does he get the value for his investment? How does it get facilitated? How does his produce get picked up? How does it get preserved? How does it get marketed? Unless these mechanisms are put into place, there is going to be a serious problem in farmer getting a higher return for his own investment.
And basically agriculture cannot be carried out without land, and of course industry also needs land, and now the government has come out with a new policy for special economic zones, which is getting bogged down because people are not willing to sell their land or willing to let government acquire their land. So do you think in India the real problem is land, because it looks like that agriculture and industry both are vying for the same piece of land which doesn't exist?
Should not be the case, because wherever industrialization has taken place, land, this problem has arisen. But there are so many pieces of land in India which are not necessarily productive in relation to its agricultural need. Within the constraints of that, it is possible to be able to get both together so that the economy keeps moving. I don't think there is a conflict in the mind of the farmer whose land is being taken away, but the method of taking it away and giving him a return on investment where he feels that he is also a part of this forward movement of industry. That is something that has to be done.
So, General, are you trying to say that they let the agricultural land be used for agriculture, and the land which is wasteland, which is not put into any productive purposes, can be used by the industry?
That's one. But however, there are some cases where there will be a competition between agriculture and putting industry down, because industry also needs a certain area from where it can operate, logistic support from where it can operate. At some places it will be competitive, and other places it need not be competitive.
Yeah, but if you have a proper land use pattern studies for the whole country, in which we can earmark the land for agriculture, for forest and for industry, and then for rest of the purposes like housing, etc., into place, will it not be a long-term solution to the problem?
Certainly. I mean, if there are better methods of ensuring better land use, it will always be a better solution than what it is being done now, clearly.
So I think we need to
really but there is something that needs to be done in that area.
That's right. Now, agriculture and manufacturing both can survive and thrive based on the growth in services, because services on standalone basis are no role, they service one of the two sectors. Now, in services in India, seems to be growing only in one area, particularly information technology, somewhere hospitality, but not so much in other areas where they can grow, where can support agriculture in a significant way, can support manufacturing in significant way like logistical management, etc. Do you think these services, if they have to grow now, they will have to be focused on some of the key concerns of India?
True, services, there are financial services which need to get opened up. There are legal services that could perhaps be opened up in relation to making sure that we get a competitive return on the way we open up. And a lot depends on this interdependent world, how the other world opens up to us, instead of it only being a one-way street. But clearly services can expand outside the IT that we begin to understand today.
And when we talk about opening up of services for outside competition, what is the view of CII on lawyers from other countries coming and setting up offices here, chartered accountants coming and doing it here, when those same professionals from India are not able to go and do the similar activities in other countries because there are, we can say, non-tariff barriers which are coming in the way?
Clearly, wherever there are non-tariff barriers, we have to be concerned. But what we are doing today is probably 400 million market. If we open up, we're probably going to enter a 20 billion market. So we have to see what opportunities are waiting to happen, provided it's a give and take and not a one-way street.
Yeah. And again, services that sector is growing because of education. People are getting skills or acquiring knowledge through education, and therefore they can get jobs in that sector. But clearly, this is now again proving as another impediment, because education is not able to provide the access of education to everybody else. So you think we really need reforms in education itself, because unless that is done, services will not be sustainable?
Actually, you hit a very, very important aspect of where India finds itself today. Allow me to give you some statistics. As our president says very often, basing on fact, that we have today about 320 million children in India between the age of 6 and 16. By some estimate, 100 million don't go to school. By another estimate, out of 220 million left out, nearly 180 million will be school dropouts. If this is the profile of a youthful country, which is the youngest in the world, education clearly becomes an area of concern. Concern not necessarily in the upper end, where we are getting good, but we need more. We need more scientists coming out. We need more engineers coming out who are employable. But we also need a workforce which operates in the middle zone. And therefore, very loosely within the CII, we have structured it to say we need white collar, we need grey collar, which is the knowledge worker of tomorrow, we need blue collar, but blue collar that gets skilled and upskilled every time he's on a job, and not that he enters in one and exits in one. And lastly, we need rust collar, a lower end worker whom we don't recognize today because we don't train him to benchmark global standards. So if the educational system doesn't change and conform to looking at dropouts being skilled for a service, manufacturing and agricultural economy that is going to be the third largest in the world in 2030, there's going to be a serious problem. And perhaps the solution lies, if there is some diffidence in the minds of those who are dealing with education, that it should not be opened up to the private sector. We definitely need a national skill development authority, which is autonomous, where private can invest public can compete with it, so that the dropout ratio, which is becoming so large, is actually taken care of, and our productivity increases. It will surprise you to know that even by today's standards, the productivity of an Indian worker is perhaps half of that of Thailand and 1/3 of that of Mexico. We need to move.
We'll continue with this dialogue. We'll just take a short break. Stay tuned. Don't go away. We are talking on Top Shot to General Mehta. So welcome back to this edition of Top Shot, in which I am Suresh Prabhu talking to General Mehta, Director General of CII, on issues concerning how industry looks at national issues. So General Mehta, you are talking about a very interesting point of how do we inculcate skills into the a large number of Indians who are not able to get employed because of this. So you were mentioning about that.
Let me mention with all the conviction that I have, having studied this for some time now, that one important change that seems to waiting to happen is, as I said earlier, and let me repeat it by saying, we need to set up a national skill development authority which is autonomous. It enables people to invest in skilling human workforce. It is our view within CII, after a large number of studies, that because of the way the population spread across the world, and as youthful as our profile is, we are going to remain a youthful profile till about 2030, 35. Today, the average age of a Japanese is 42. Ours is less than 24. In 20, 30 years' time, out of every 100 people employed in the workforce in Japan, over 65 will be over the age of 65, while our figure will be only be 12 or 18. Now, with that breakdown, it is imperative that we do skilling of our workforce, especially those who are going to drop out of school and even those who do higher education. But what is the impediment? The impediment is that we are not in a position to take it into the marketplace, and the market decide what skills are required. Market must decide what skills are required in relation to the global demand, so that investors come into India, say, here is a skill available, I get a better return on investment, why don't I put my plant and machinery in India? We are allowing that opportunity to pass.
So you want this skill development authority to be in private sector?
Autonomous.
Okay.
Government lays down policy. It enables people who fulfill the provisions to get into the market to provide skilling in carpentry, architecture, masonry, farming, farm produce.
So you mean this should be something which will be independent of government, at the same time private sector can participate in it?
Private and public.
That's right.
And why I mention public is, today we have over 5,000 ITIs in our country, which has about a 7.5 lakh number of people who come out of ITIs. But the regret of all regrets is that most of them are not employable.
General Mehta, the other concern that the country has and the world has is on climate change. And it is now concluded that the industrial revolution of 1750, which was started at that time, is a cause of climate change. Now there is so much of pressure on India to take commitments of reducing greenhouse gases. So I would like to know from you two things. One, is it the right approach that India should take commitment? Number two, what is Indian industry doing to combat this climate change? Because in many ways, industry has a role to play in that.
Absolutely. And I must say, to the credit of our industry, that they have always taken a long-term view of this. I don't think our industrial members are turning around to say that some other countries in the West did it, now it is our turn. While they are insisting that the others must take on their responsibility, things like sustainability and competitiveness is a key concern of most of our members in the CII. And it's for that reason that we have set up centers of excellence in sustainable development here in Delhi. We've also set up a center for green businesses in Hyderabad. And we're bringing up a sustainability index, green business index, and innovation index, all with the idea of ensuring that our contribution remains as low as possible. We continue to remain competitive with the full hope that those who have done the damage will understand their responsibility in passing on technologies to countries like us who are willing to come forward, although we were not great contributors in what happened in the past.
So you mean that Indian industry has realized the dangers of climate change and trying to respond to it adequately?
I believe it has always realized it, and it is in the process of doing everything that it can do to try and ensure that it doesn't make the situation worse.
Gentlemen, this one challenge that we have is of course climate change, and but the biggest challenge to society is sustainability, because sustainability of environment is one, but sustainability of society depends upon a large section of Indian population which is not able to get jobs because they are belonging to a section which has been neglected in the past. Government of India is thinking of coming out with a reservation for such section in private sector. What is the view of CII on the reservation of such employees in private sector?
You see, the CII is clearly of the view that reservation is counterproductive. It divides society, and the notion that everybody is spreading that the industry thinks that they are not as efficient as the other is notional. I don't think anybody in the industry feels that those who belongs to the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribes category are any less efficient or competent. But we do realize that they have not been given an opportunity to come up to a level playing field. Therefore, our program of the affirmative action, launched after the Prime Minister spoke to us, being steered by Dr. Irani, being monitored by our past presidents, and now being looked at by CII and all its staff throughout the country, the determination is we will do to enable the SC/ST to come up to the levels instead of bringing the mark down. It is possible to do it. We have made certain commitments. We are committed to achieving them in the time frame that we have said. Clearly, they were very modest commitments, but as years go by, we will be able to raise the bar and make sure that it is larger, greater and better. But reservation is not the answer.
But you talked about affirmative action. Would like to link this affirmative action not just to job quotas but also to education, because if skills are upgraded, then there is a greater possibility for that section to also join.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So therefore, in the affirmative action that we are carrying out, we are looking at training them, skilling them, providing them opportunities if tuition is required, developing entrepreneurial spirit amongst them, and also linking them with jobs.
So education and job opportunities will go hand in hand, and therefore we really need to look at both. Gentlemen, while little earlier we were talking about India's age profile, which is really young as compared to the rest of the world, and that is somehow tempting people to conclude that we'll get benefits of this and demographic dividends will accrue to us, and therefore more population is always good in India's interest. So what is your view on whether India should have more population or India should control population and we should try to stabilize at some level, because otherwise natural capital doesn't grow with population?
No, clearly it can be nobody's view that this must expand exponentially without any consideration of what we can sustain and afford. But having put that aside, I do want to pick up on something which we didn't discuss earlier. But what we are seeing in India is not only that we have a youthful profile. I think we are seeing a change in mindset of the youthful profile. The thing I want to mark out here for you and for the viewers is that my generation, and I am now 60 plus, grew up with a mindset of not losing. The present generation is growing up with a mindset that we can win and we will win. This fundamental shift in the mindset is a great opportunity for us to multiply our growth potential. But we have to put a few things in place. Skilling, education is one key area in which we must address. And any mindset of the past, that my generation, they must look at the opportunity, because we have a 10 years window of opportunity to make this happen.
I'm sure this change mindset of winning at any cost must be making you happy.
Not at any cost. There are ethical values.
I know,
win.
with using rightful means, but it must be making you very happy as a general, because when you are commanding an army, you always want to win.
I am absolutely delighted, because in no other vocation in life, unlike the services, in the services there is no prize for a runner-up. And where there is no prize for a runner-up, and to have a youthful profile who want to win and can win is always a great asset.
But talking about runners-up, even best of estimation, like whether Goldman Sachs or others who are made, they are already putting India behind China. So we are finally going to end up as runners-up to China. Can we ever take up this challenge and say that we'll be ahead of China?
Time will tell, but I think we have the potential. We have a young mindset that can do it. And at the moment, I don't want to sound competitive. Both our economies are very complementary because they are into manufacturing, we are into services. My hope is, if this is going to be the Asian century, both countries will have to grow at paces and levels that they've never shown before, and both are capable of doing it.
And generally, you said you satisfies you to see a changing India, and I'm sure you talked about how changes you're seen. What do you like to see India in next, say, 25 years? Where do you think India is heading for, and where should head for actually?
I personally think, well, I must precede that by saying I'm actually a born optimist. I am seeing a very confident India, a very capable India, an India which the world will look at, not only in terms of economics, not only in terms of growth, not only in terms of manufacturing, services and infrastructure, an India that combines the values of all this and puts together something that the other parts of the world might find difficult to do, and that is, as opposed to the prevailing value of clash of civilizations, India represents confluence of civilizations. So our ability to be able to integrate that is perhaps going to be a kickstarter of a large number of activities around us, because we are seeing some forms of instability coming in due to this newfangled threat called terrorism. And I think we have all the wherewithal, both economical, social, as well as material and mental, to be able to handle this in ways which will be a beacon for everybody else to follow.
Well, you talked about mindset. Lately we are seeing for a long time, we are always hoping that foreign investment come into India. Now we are seeing that Indian industry is actually making investments outside India. So this is a new challenge, not for us, but for the others.
This only echoes the sentiment I expressed earlier, that we can win and we will win. We have no hesitation in buying a chorus, as much as we had no hesitation in selling Hutch and Vodafone coming in. We are willing to stake the challenge at the price which is affordable.
Yeah, but the common man always wonders, that on one hand we are inviting FDI into the country, on the other hand our own industry is rather than making investments within the country, making it outside. So do you think it is some sort of a paradox? Or?
No, it's not a paradox. When our industry is making investments outside, it is not only putting capital in the global marketplace, but it is also tying up for higher technologies, new systems, global practices, and in the turn bringing that in to multiply the value that we have already got. If on the one side we are saying it's a globalized world, we must anticipate that a globalized world is also an interdependent world. And in an interdependent world, you cannot only be living as a frog in the well, you have to move out to garner all the capability that exist wherever they happen.
Yeah, and talking about these best practices that these companies will acquire and use them in India, is Indian industry doing enough to promote corporate social responsibilities, which is one of the accepted global practice worldwide, into Indian context?
Certainly. We have a mission. Within the CII, we have a division called Corporate Social Responsibility. We are setting up a center of excellence in Chennai, being spearheaded and sponsored by the TVS Group, Mr. Venu Srinivasan and his team, which will be a center for corporate social citizenship. The basic area is that while industry is not in a position to do everything for the country, but in the areas in which they operate, they must link to the people. And this linkage is what they provide through corporate social responsibility, not only in the area in which they operate, but to the workers who operate with them in their workforce. Certainly this is an area of not only concern, but is an area of interest as far as our membership is concerned. And as much as they can do, perhaps they need to do more, and they are conscious of it. The other day, Mr. Tata mentioned to us during our national conference that, unannounced, he has a 750 crore investment in corporate social responsibility.
Tata's alone?
Alone, by themselves. So you can understand what sort of a commitment our large companies' houses are coming from.
But is it confining only to Tata's or getting institutionalized and percolating down to all the industries?
They lead, but it's percolating.
So we hope that there will be more and more companies coming forward and doing